Hello and welcome to What is Magic, a series of videos that I've created having a discussion with some of the most interesting and some of the most creative minds in magic currently about what magic is. We talk a little bit more philosophically about magic, what magic means to our audiences, what magic means to us, and how we can be the best magicians possible for our audiences. In this episode, I speak to John Steiner, who is an extraordinary close-up magician. In spite of the digital days of our time, he is keeping magic alive. Born in 1989, raised in Paris and Barcelona, John has performed for audiences in Europe and the US. His ability to speak 5 different languages has taken him all over the world. He won first place at the 2015 strolling competition at the Magic Castle in Hollywood. He performs with charm and ease, with a dynamic personality and the ability to relate to anyone. Most magicians claim it's magic, but it's really a trick. But with John, he claims it's a trick, but you believe it's really magic. I hope you enjoy this one. It's a fascinating chat. Sit back, have a drink, and let me introduce Mr. John Steiner. John, thank you so much for joining me for this video.
Well, thank you for having me.
So I am going to jump straight in here. And the first question that I have for you is a very simple one. What is magic?
Well, there's many different types of magic, but the one that we do, I would say, could be defined as an impossible new moment of having witnessed something that goes beyond your comprehension.
That I think is very interesting. For me, the idea of showing someone something, offering someone an experience that goes beyond their comprehension is exactly true. But what really interests me in your reply is what we do as magic. So,
Yeah.
what other forms of magic are there?
Well, I think there's many. There's the magic of nature, the magic of love, the magic of coincidences. Life itself is magical because we don't comprehend all of it or why we're here. Everybody tries to find the purpose, but the only purpose is actually to to live it, to explore, and to do as many things as possible. And I always say though, only those who believe in magic will be able to experience it. So it's kind of sad when you think about it, because those who don't, which are many, right, don't get to live those moments. So I think as magicians, we are here to remind people that life is magical. Like as we grow, we lose it because of the responsibilities we have, the system, everything. But I think when people see magic, it kind of shakes their world and makes them rethink everything. If it's done in the right way, of course. If it's a silly trick, then it's a silly trick.
Well, do you think that there's a place for silly tricks as well? Because we have in many forms of creative arts, not just magic itself, but also acting. We have silly forms of acting, and then we have more serious forms of acting and method acting, and there's so many different variations. Is
Yeah.
there a place in magic for magic that really tries to affect someone, like you say, on that level of giving them this really crazy experience that something beyond their comprehension has happened? Is there a place for the other kind of magic as well?
I think there's a place for all types of magic, from the silly trick to something more meaningful and memorable. It just depends what you want to give at that moment to the people, to your audience, or people in front of you. So it's all valid, if you want to be a magician who's just doing silly tricks and all that, like, go for it. I really don't mind. There's always an audience for it, but it just depends what you want to do with other people. Oh, wait, put this in silence. Right.
I think that is a form of magic as well. The way that we can be in touch with people and connected with people these days, in terms of receiving a message.
Oh, well,
Uh,
technology is magic for sure,
yeah.
because when you don't understand technology, it's magical, right?
Mm.
And that's why sometimes we actually use technology, right? When we do the magic.
Exactly. There is something else that I might touch on in a little bit about your what you said about other forms of magic. So, well, I think try to expand on this because I would like to know you've explained your thoughts on what magic is and perhaps what it could be to people. Could you share with us, if you know, if you can remember, what was your first experience of magic? And that might not be magic as in magic tricks, just
Mhm.
the way you described it as magic is an experience of something that's incomprehensible, that's just an amazing thing beyond your understanding. Do you remember what your
Yeah,
first experience of that was?
I do remember, and it was actually I was 12 years old, and I was in Rome walking in the streets with my parents, and I saw this old magic shop called Eclectica, and I walked inside, and the guy working there started doing lots of tricks to me, and I never seen magic before close up in my life, and that was the first time I realized, oh, something like this exists, right? And it's a good question you're asking me. Did you live it besides with tricks, like in another moment, right?
Mm,
Just a magical thing. But I think that not that I can remember. Like that day was the one I can remember. Why? Because I think that when you're a kid, you live in a magical world. So
yeah.
everything is magical. Yes. So why would you remember a specific moment when everything's so magical? Now, as we grow, like I said, we lose it. And 12 years old is an interesting age because you're half a kid, half an adult, you're starting to
Mhm.
become. So it's like this mix of both worlds. And yeah, so for me, the first time was I was 12 years old in Rome, and this guy was wonderful because he was not a good seller. Like actually, I learned a couple of years after they kicked him out because I had like literally like 50 people behind me who wanted to buy things, and he didn't care. He saw me with the biggest smile, and he was just doing trick after trick. And that was just
Mhm.
the first time where I was like, okay, this is cool and this exists because I didn't know about it. But I had no idea I was going to become a magician then. It was 5 years later that I realized.
Okay, well, maybe you can tell us a bit about it. This wasn't in my line of questioning, but why 5 years later? So you were roughly 17 when you decided you
Yeah.
wanted to become a magician.
Yeah, and I didn't even know at 17 how to shuffle a deck of cards. Like that day when I was 12, I just bought, like a couple of coin tricks, gimmick, all
Mhm.
pre-made, easy. The rope that becomes the handkerchief and things like that. And so yeah, basically, I was 17 and I was finishing my studies. I had to decide what college, university to go to, and I didn't see myself doing that. So for 6 7 months I was miserable, and I didn't know what direction to go to. All my friends were like, oh, come with me, study business or journalism or this or that. I was like, yeah, I don't know. And then I had a dream one night randomly. I had a dream where I saw myself as a magician, and I woke up from that dream and I was like, you know what, I could do that. I like to travel, I speak many languages, I feel comfortable in front of people. Let's do that. So I called my mom and I said, listen, instead of going to college, I'm going to become a magician. And it was a shock for my family, a scandal, whatever.
Mhm.
But I will say I was really lucky because they supported the idea. Like none of my friends believed in me at that moment, but my family did. And that was what I needed. And so that's what I did. And I never looked back. And now it's been 18 years I've been doing magic.
I love that story about the idea because I have a similar history with magic about people. My family in particular, none of them are in performing arts, none of them are in the creative fields, even. So there was
Mhm.
this big idea that I was wasting my time when pursuing magic. And of course, I think it was Paul Daniels who once said, if you choose to be a magician, you may not make much money, but you'll lead a really interesting life.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting that kind of your friends were saying, no, no, come do business, come do journalism, come do these other more credible, more professional vocations, and you literally had an epiphany in your dream that called you to the idea of being a magician.
But what's funny to me is that they all said the same thing, which was, "It is so risky." And to me, that
Mhm.
was so silly because everything's risky, no matter what route you take. See, for me, the idea of doing what everybody did and not liking it and having to, finish college and then find a job with those, academics, whatever, everybody was going to do that. So thousands of people were going to do that. And then in my mind, I was like, magic. Who does magic? No one. It's so niche. Like if I can be one of the good ones in magic, I'm always going to work. And I was right. The only thing that stopped me and us in general was COVID. For 2 years, I couldn't do any shows. Right. But
Yes.
now we're back on track and it's all good.
But that really makes me laugh as well because, of course, you mentioned about how we as we grow up and as we go through the education system, we learn in logical processes, and the kind of the magic that we have within us as children is slowly kind of ground out of us, and reality sets in and responsibilities. So for me, it's funny that you decided that the best path for yourself was an illogical route, which of course the process of performing magic for people is quite often an illogical route rather than a logical path. So
Hmm.
your life is basically a real life magic trick that's running alongside the other pieces of magic that you're sharing with people, which I think is amazing that you epitomize the idea of magic and and
But
and that logical process of doing something impossible.
But it was so logical to me because look, if you really think about it, if you're an entrepreneur, whatever, a chef who has a restaurant, everything is risky because you have to invest the money to do the business, right? And it can fail or it can work, but you had to take the risk in order to have the success. So
Mhm.
everything's going to be risky. In my mind, what was more risky was to do something that I didn't enjoy for the rest of my life, right?
Yes.
So if I had listened to others, I would probably not be here, I'm really happy that I chose magic as a path,
Mm,
a way of life, because it is a way of life to me. It's more than just a profession or a job or anything like that. And
mm.
I think many magicians don't believe in magic, and that to me is interesting as well. They just do the tricks and don't believe in magic at all.
I think that's why when I had this idea of videos that I knew that I wanted to have you on one of these episodes because I think it was 5 years ago that I think we met up in London, and you were just I think you were in London at that point, and I messaged you. I think I saw you on social media, and I thought, "Wow, this guy's a fantastic magician, and he's, what in my opinion, what a magician should be." And then we met up in, I forget which hotel it was, but we had a drink and had a chat. And I think at that point, it was very obvious to me that you were what I would call a real magician, someone who really cares about their audience and cares about how their magic is perceived and the journey that you're providing to people, rather than, like you say, someone who is a magician but doesn't necessarily believe in the magic that they're doing. They do it as a means of making money, not as a lifestyle. And I think that's obvious with a lot of people.
Yeah, but not only that, I think it's about thinking of who you are and what you do and why you do it, right? So because it just doesn't just apply to magic, but in this case, since we're speaking about magic, right? So many magicians, they just do some tricks and
Mhm,
then they work. People they get a reaction, right? And they keep doing that over and over during years, and they're satisfied because they think, okay, it's working, and that's it. But then your magic isn't special or meaningful because you're not thinking about those details. For example, when I met Doug McKenzie in New York a few years ago, he told me something very interesting that I applied to all my magic now, which is what will be the story that people will remember after they've seen your magic, right? And this
mhm.
is so important because that's what's going to make your magic live longer because people are going to be talking about you, right? And they're going to be sharing the experience they lived through your magic. But if you don't analyze that, or not just that, also like, who am I? How do I talk? How do I walk? What is the type of experience I want to give to others? When you ask yourself those questions, you're able to modify those things into whatever version you believe is the best for them, right? But if you're not even
Mhm.
asking yourself those questions, then you're just doing for no reason, right? And so I think that's what makes the difference between the good and bad, all the
Th
details.
There's a really interesting quote. I forget where it comes from, but it goes, "People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel." And I think that goes in line with what you're saying. emotions and the story and the journey that you take people through with a magic trick often is a lot more important than the trick itself.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
as I said to you yesterday, I think we think very similar on this. So I'm going to move on. We covered your first memory of magic, which I think is a beautiful kind of memory to have in a magic shop, and I'm sure lots of magicians have this similar story as well. Maybe not in the glories of Rome,
You know what's funny?
but yes.
Giancarlo Scalia, great magician,
Mhm.
he had the same, like the first time he saw magic was at the same magic shop, same guy. Yeah. So it's a funny coincidence.
These stories, I think, are what continue to keep magic alive and these real experiences that people have. But that brings me to the question that I wanted to ask about. We've spoken a little bit about what magic is and what it can be and your experience of magic, but right now in 2024, leading into 2025, what what do you think magic is now? Because of course, magic 500 years ago would have had you possibly burned at the stake or would have had a witch hunt against you. So what currently is magic for you?
Well, magic is the second oldest profession, right? So um, I think we've always been adapting to the evolution of life itself. Right now, for example, magic back in the days, we used to make it appear inside a little wooden box, but now we use our iPhones and technology to do magic, right? Because we've adapted to the current situation. So I think magic is always going to be doing that. In what way? Well, who knows? Because we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future. But what we do know is that we can compare from today and 100 years back, let's say, or 1,000, doesn't matter. What type of magic we used to do and what type of magic we're doing now, right? And it's very interesting to see the evolution. But you notice that also many classics stay classic, but just readapted with new technology. Yeah. And so I think magic is always going to be present. It's that thing where you can have um, so many ideas and be creative with it, and actually turn those ideas into life. And
Mhm,
so see, it's funny because at the beginning we all started learning with DVDs, books, YouTube, other things. And then I remember 10 years ago when I met Armando Lucero in Las Vegas, he told me something that at that time I was like, this guy's crazy. It didn't make sense to me, but now I understand. Well, he said to me, listen, don't buy any more books, don't do any more DVDs, just think of what you want to do and come up with it yourself. And to me at that
mhm.
time, I was like, well, what do you mean? I can't do that, right? But now I understand because eventually I got to that point. But the only way you can get to this point is by studying everything that existed before in magic, right? So you know all the history, everything that has been done. And
Mhm.
then hopefully you get to this point. And it's wonderful because that's when you can become the most original and creative because it just, through your ideas. You're not thinking, many times we do a whole story around an effect, but the right way would be to just think of what you would like to do and then find the method afterwards, not caring
Thi
of what will be the
this
method.
is excellent because at many of the events, that I perform at, people will always ask, "Oh, how do you come up with new ideas? Oh, is your magic original, or do you learn it from somewhere else?" And I always explain to people that the easiest way to understand as a non-magician is that if you take piano and a person who can play the piano, if they know the keys and they know the chords and they understand the fundamentals of a piano, they can make you feel sad, they can make you feel happy, they can play any piece of music they want. And all it is changing the order and the structure of the music. And I feel like this is the same with magic. If you have an underlying understanding of, as you say, the classics of magic, the foundations of magic, is it seven effect? There are only ever seven effects, right?
Hmm.
Making something disappear, making something transform, making something teleport, transportation. So
I
when
think there
we
might
only
be more, but yeah, not many, like between seven and
it's
10.
Yes, I think it's something like that. I forget the exact ones, but when we only have such a small pool to choose from in terms of building an effect, it makes sense, like you say, that we would work backwards and we would work from, okay, what do we want to achieve with this trick? Or if we have a performance situation coming up, whether that be for a paying client or whether that be for family getting together for a celebration, how do we want people to feel? What memory do we want to leave them with? So I love that. And when in terms of the magic that you perform, and you said that often these days you try to think about what is it that you want to create for your audience. In this current day, what is it that you try to create? Is it magic that's unique? Is it something that happens inside other people's hands? Is it something that they can feel, or is it something that they see, or is it something that they hear? What are the components that
Okay.
you try to build into your
That's
magic?
it's a good question. So basically, it's not about if it's in their hands, what they feel. All it, to me, it's more like this is the perspective. So if I wasn't a magician and I were to meet one, what would I like to see? Right? What would I like, or what do I see that experience being like? Certainly not a type of magic of pick a card, cut the deck, spell your name, and there's the card, right? Because you know what? At the end of the day, when the card flips and it's their card, nobody cares. Yeah, because it's
Mhm,
not interesting. It's not really magical, let's say. No offense for those who are doing, spelling card tricks and all that. Totally fine. But so in my mind is if I wasn't a magician and were to meet one, what would I like to see? And so another thing that I said to myself is I can not only just do card tricks, because to me, if you really had powers, right, you should be able to do things with whatever, with anything,
mhm,
spoon, with a cell phone, with no matter what object. So that was like the rules I applied, right, of like, okay, and from there, then you think of the routines you want to do and what will be the story. So I think what's really important in order to evolve to this. So at the beginning, I was doing lots of different tricks, and this mindset didn't come many years later, right? And so I had to eliminate and stop doing many of the tricks I used to do because they didn't go in that line, right? Because I
mhm.
think that the art of illusion starts with tricks, but then eventually you do it so well, and that's why it's the art, right, that the tricks become and feel like real magic. And that's
Yes.
the beauty of the illusion, right? So that's why when you have those people who are really want to know the secret and get frustrated because they want to know how it works, I say to them, it doesn't matter. I say, how did it feel? Was it
Mhm.
magical? Yes, then enjoy that moment. Who cares?
There's something that at events I've recently, over the last 6 to 12 months, started saying to people when they say to me, "Oh, it just annoys me so much. How do you do it? How did you get that thing over there?" Or whatever the trick may have been. And I always say to them, "If I told you, would it matter? Why do you want to know the secret? Because no one goes to the cinema or to see a film and to say, well, I know that's ridiculous. People don't fly. Superman
Mm,
isn't real.
mm,
Superpowers aren't. They don't go with that idea of disbelief already. They go with the idea to enjoy the experience, and they go and believe in the idea of the impossible. So I always try to instill this idea into my audience that experiencing the magic is so much more rich and enjoyable than trying to figure out how it happened.
no, definitely. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that it just it doesn't matter, but I understand why they want to know because I think it's part of the human evolution, right? Like how do we
Mm,
evolve understanding how things work? And then suddenly we find ourselves in a moment where we do not comprehend what just happened. But that's why magic is so attractive. And that's the reason people love it. And sometimes it's good not to know because anyways you don't know anything everything about the universe and about life, right? So why would you care so much about this little trick that you just saw?
yeah.
Why wouldn't you care more about how you came here, what happens after death? Those are more intriguing questions than just this trick. And so yeah, so it's always that mix of like wanting to know, but at the same time yet not wanting to know. Sometimes I give the example of Santa Claus to them. You know,
Mhm.
remember when you were a kid and Santa Claus arrived with all the gifts and you loved it and you were so happy, and then the day you found out that it was your parents, you were so bummed and disappointed.
Mhm.
Well, if I tell you the secret, you're gonna feel the same way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Interestingly, you travel a lot and you perform for lots of different kinds of people. So I wonder if do you think you experience a different thing depending on your audience. So let's say someone's very wealthy and educated compared to someone who is not so wealthy and educated. Do you see a difference in people wanting to know or not wanting to know? Do you see any pattern in any of your audiences where some people just say, "No, I don't want to know. I live for today. I love the moment. I've lived in that moment. What you've provided to me, John, is a wonderful moment of magic, and I'm going to cherish that." Or do you see, for example, if you're entertaining business people, do you see this idea of power that they need to try to know because not knowing because like you said before, we grow up with education and we grow up with B is a result of A. And if A happens, B must happen after that. So we have this structured way of thinking by the time we're adults. So do you see a pattern with the different kinds of people that you perform for? Do they react in very different ways to the magic that you show them?
Well, I think magic is the universal language. It doesn't matter where you're from, what background you have. You know, everybody connects in the same
Yeah.
way. And so then it depends. For example, some people that I noticed want to know more are scientists, but because that's what they
Yeah.
do, right? They study the laws of physics and everything. So when they see magic, I notice they get more frustrated. But then I realized that it doesn't matter what field they come from or where they come from, if they're rich or poor, if they're business or not business people. I think it depends about the individual. The same
Mm,
way I learned some people think magic is expensive, some people pay for it, some people don't want to pay for it. And so I think it doesn't matter how much money you have. I think what matters is if you consider that this moment is worth this. And
mhm.
that's and it doesn't matter because yeah, many times I had people with more or less who loved it and some others who complained, who were like, no, I'm not going to do it because I think it's too much. And I was like, okay,
Yes.
whatever. So yeah, it just depends on the individual. It's not about what type of work or what country they come from. The only thing I would say is that scientists have more this thing, and but I love doing magic to them because they get so frustrated, and it's so funny to see because they know so many things, right? And then suddenly you're proving them wrong or right, and they're like, "Ah."
I actually recently had this experience with a few engineers. There were
Mm,
some engineers at some of the events that I was at, and you're quite right. They have this understanding that they know the principles of physics and they know the dynamics of how things work, and then you share something with them that shows them the opposite. And there is this curiosity, which I guess is why they got into those professions as well. But outside of whether someone's rich or poor, and outside of someone's profession, do you think that there's any differences culturally? Because I know so some of my family are Pakistani,
mm,
and I noticed that a lot of South Asian culture around the idea of magic and around the idea of live performance is a lot more rich, it's a lot more vibrant. They want to have this social interaction with people. They want to sit down with you and enjoy something together. Whereas lots of what I would call Western events, there's a segregation, there's a lot of people being outside, maybe having a smoke, people being on their phones, people being in between conversations. So I wonder if you see any difference culturally, because of course you're currently in Madrid, right?
yeah, currently in Spain, but I've been many places, and yes, I would say it depends where you're from. It changes because you
Yes.
have a different sets of beliefs, and because of that, you perceive magic in a different way. And
Mhm.
so, of course, that's going to affect the same way. Like you said, if we went in the past and did magic, maybe they said, "Oh, the witch, we need to cut it," But now it's like totally fine. And then, so depending on where you go, this is why the best thing you can do is just do the magic and go away and let that person believe whatever it is they want to believe in their perspective. And that's it. Right?
That's a great, I think, philosophy to have. Don't force anything on them. Share what you have to share with them, and then allow them to come to their own conclusions of how much they enjoyed it, or what they think of what you've shared with them.
I think that's the best way to go. You shouldn't, leaving magic on the side. If we're talking about like, spirituality or awakening or things like this, you shouldn't like. I don't like gurus because they're telling you I have the way and you should follow my way, and if you do, you will get to where you're supposed to be, right? But that's so wrong to me. We're all divine. We are all perfectly fine the way we are. It's just the only thing you can do, the best thing you can do is you can inspire others to be curious and try to start that change within them, but it has to
Mhm.
start from within. So it has to be they want to do it. So you're only doing something that puts that little seed, and then they keep going on that journey because it's such a long and intense journey anyways that unless you really want to do it, there's nobody else can tell you to do that.
This is, I have a great example of this as well. I'm sure many magicians watching this will have had the same experience, but at a lot of events, I'll approach. Let's say I'm in a drinks reception, a cocktail reception, and I'll approach a group of people and I'll say, "Hello, good evening. So and so's hired me to entertain. Would you like to be entertained for a few minutes, or whatever it may be?" And they say, "No, no, no, we're okay, thank you." And then I say, "Okay, no problem. Enjoy your evening. Have a fantastic time." And then they see me at the next group of people, and they see that group of people laughing and smiling and having fun. And then they say, "Oh, would you mind coming back to us? We'd love to see something." Because them witnessing that interaction has changed their mind of what the outcome might be. Because
Mhm.
as you said earlier, there are some magicians in the world who simply perform tricks. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. We all, it both in life and in magic, have different experiences in terms of how much experience we have in magic, in our job, in politics, in whatever it may be. So we can only operate in our level of understanding of things. And that means that some magicians will be very different from other magicians. So I think that some people have experiences where that magician will do something simple and it will be a trick, and someone will say, "That was cool. I enjoyed that. That was fun." But then they'll see another magician and they'll see a trick by them and they'll say, "Wow, that that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. That gave me goosebumps."
Mm.
So it's really interesting to see the shift in what you're saying, where people, you just allow people to be themselves, and in doing that they have this realization of, oh, actually magic can be an amazing experience. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
and
trying. Go on, go on.
when on that subject, don't get annoyed if you're doing strolling magic somewhere at a restaurant or whatever, and people say no in that moment. You don't know, you're interrupting them. You don't know what they're
Yes.
talking about. Maybe they're having a very serious conversation, and at that time they don't want to see magic, and they're being polite, saying no, right now I don't want to, right? So you should never take it personally. You never know
Mhm.
what people are doing, and even if they say no because they don't want to, maybe you can also think of maybe they had a bad experience with another magician. Maybe
Yes.
this very terrible guy came, and they think that you're going to offer the same. So this is why when you do things right, you're doing a favor to other magicians too. Because if you create a beautiful experience for someone, the next day they run into a magician, they're going to be so excited about it. Yes, yes, I want to do magic. But when you have a magician, who is not doing things right, who's bringing people on stage, not having fun with them, but making fun of them, right, and
Mhm.
things like this. Then the next time you need a volunteer, everybody's going to be like, "Oh no, not me, not me,"
Yes.
So yeah, definitely.
This brings me to the next question. We were talking about what magic is and what it can be to people, and you did mention this earlier. What do you think? Where do you think magic is going? So in the future, in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years, and I'll explain maybe a little bit of my thoughts first, and then you can elaborate on that. So one of the interesting things I think about magic is that it's one of the things that I don't think will ever be replaced by robots or AI or virtual reality or anything like that, because it's an analog technology. As you said, magic is one of the oldest professions that we know of. So I struggle to believe that with the complexity of the dexterity and the storytelling and the engaging with people dynamically that changes from second to second, I struggle to believe that robots will ever replace us as magicians. So I wonder where you see magic going in the next
I
5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
No, I think we're going to use AI as a tool as magicians. You know, we're going to
Okay.
use it. Yeah, yeah. I think AI is going to be very useful for magicians in order to do crazy tricks. But it's not that there's going to be a robot magician performing for people, because you know, this is something I say a lot to people. The most important thing when you do magic is your charisma, your present, you know, like your connection, the way you connect with people. Because I always say, I don't care if you're the best guy technically, if you're boring, I'd rather see someone who's not technically as good, but is a great entertainer.
Hmm.
People want to go out, have a great time, have a magical evening, but it's an overall experience. Yes, this is why being a good magician takes time. It's very difficult. You cannot be a good, like, because you have to be, you know, good with the dexterity, a storyteller. You have to be funny. You have to know how to be on a stage. You have to do so many things. So all those things take time. And once you achieve them all together, then you can put on a show. But before that, you cannot. And another thing is that you need help. We have a
Hmm.
tendency, magicians, to want to do everything by ourselves, and that's wrong. It's so wrong. Nobody does that. You know, if you want to create a show, you don't do it by yourself. You hire people to help you. You hire the best of their field, of each field, right? The sound guy, the light guy, the guy who does just the mise en scène, the structure of the show, all of this. Yeah, it should be a team and not just one person. Like we know about the magic, but they know about their things.
So you think that as we move into the future and perhaps as we become, as the movies have told us for the last 40 years, as we become this increasingly dependent technological society where we're all living through, VR headsets when we're at work and things like this, if it does go that way, you think that magicians will still, we will be what we are now, and we might utilize technology more and more as technology advances, but as magicians, we will continue to be this analog experience of human interaction.
Well, look, you can remember when COVID happened and some people were doing Zoom shows because it was the only way of doing magic to people.
Mhm,
And it was clever, yet I spoke to a lot of people and they all said the same to me. It's because it was the only option available. Otherwise, I would much rather go in a theater or to see a live show or see magic right in front of me than not
mhm,
on Zoom. Because you also get it with the difference between close up and stage magic. Many times you have people, when they see you doing close up, they're like, oh my God, this is so wonderful. It's fascinating because, you know, I'm right here in front of you. And on stage, sometimes I feel cheated. Or when it's on TV, I feel cheated. So I feel that's a very important point, because people feel cheated when it's on the screen or when they're not really there living that moment. So I think people are always going to want to change, to have or chase the most authentic magical moment. And how do you do that? By being with another human being who can share that with you, not a robot on a screen or putting your VR headset going into a place. Because you could do that with technology. Imagine like a magic castle where instead of going to LA, you would just put your
mhm.
VR headset and you walk inside a virtual magic castle, and then you go into a room and you have a magician come out. Yeah, you could do that. And you could probably, you know, get a positive experience from it, but it will never feel the same because
Yes.
you're not really there, right? So again, we need to see how things go too, because we need to wait for the future to arrive to see what we decide to do. For example, maybe we have so much technology that people actually love going back to basics, right? Love actually going to see a magician live and all
Mhm,
this, instead of using it with all the technology. And when I say back to basics, if you notice too with magic, like 30 years ago, doing big illusions was like, you know, the thing. But I feel nowadays, I mean, there's still some amazing, great big illusions, but when I ask people, they always prefer the the tricks that don't involve weird boxes that they've never seen before. Like if like you
Yes.
can borrow someone's cell phone and it's their phone or their credit card or something that belongs to them, they know it's not tricked in any way. So then it becomes even more mesmerizing because they have no clue of how it works. But if you go on stage and you have this weird box, you're like, oh yeah, I've never seen before, and you're going to see a magic show. Yeah, clearly you're just saying to the audience, yeah, I have this super trick box and I'm going to do something with it. Now, even okay, they don't know how it works and they're still going to be amazed, but the feeling
Yes.
is not the same.
I agree. I always say to people that as a magician, I feel fortunate because whatever happens in the future, magic is one of those real experiences, real human experiences, exchanges of something that's very different and it's very analog. So I try not to perform any kind of magic with technology, with mobile phones, with things, because as you say, when people are dealing with paper and when they're dealing with credit cards and rings and all these kinds of things, they know what is possible with those things. They know that you can't take a ring and make it liquid and then make it vanish, and because that's their ring that they wear on their finger every day. So I think
Yeah,
that this is really important.
but you can still do it with technology. For example, if you do anything with their phone, it's technology, but it's theirs. So
Yes.
they'll love it in the same way because it's not like it's different if you do something weird, like something that feels a lot like an application and it's your phone and you've never seen something
Hmm.
like that. That's not as magical. But if you take their phone and you use a feature that everybody has, like the calculator or another one, or the
Hmm.
camera, the pictures, and you do magic with that, they're going to be amazed, and they're going to be actually appreciating the fact that you've been able to adapt to the technology, like we were mentioning before. And so, because they'll say comments like, "Oh my God, yeah, you're not just doing this; you're doing actually with my phone and that." And so, yeah, it's very important to always adapt. I remember I have a funny story. I used to do when I have back in the days. I was a performer at the Magic Castle, and I didn't have an iPhone. I had a Nokia, right?
Hmm.
But iPhones already came out. But I was using the Nokia for the show because it still had a battery case that I could
Yes.
open, right? And inside would be the signed card. But then what happened is this: I was hearing people when I pull out the phone whispering in the audience, and like, "What the phone?" Like, because before I would do a trick, it was normal, it was a normal phone. But now everybody had iPhones, so then pulling out the Nokia felt to them like a gimmick.
Yeah.
So I was forced to stop using that because it felt like a gimmick. And before that, the same way where you have the little wooden box and the card
Hmm.
comes inside, that felt like a gimmick. So that's why I decided to do the phone. But then the phone got old and then the phone felt like a gimmick. So I had to go do something else. So for example, you can also do it with the phone and you pull it out of the screen. Technically,
Hmm.
it's not magical because it wasn't really physically inside, but visually, it does the same effect. So yeah, that's the adaptation of the card inside something.
I,
But
I think people will find this really useful. The idea of how we shouldn't necessarily stick to what's worked, because as we move throughout time, everything changes, everything
yes,
adapts, and things that don't adapt usually don't last very long. So as magicians, we need to become adaptable to what our current time determines as
in
magic.
life,
Mm,
adaptation is the superpower of human beings. Like it's the only way to move forward is to adapt and evolve with what's coming. And you can see it, for example, when you see an old magic act. Some can last forever, but it's really rare. Many,
mm,
you see them and you're like, okay, yeah, if you did that today, doing that type of magic dressed in this way, it wouldn't work, right?
yes.
Eh, so because it's evolving into something else, and it's actually very beautiful to see the evolution of it, to compare what was done 40 years ago and now. But I think we're lucky in magic because, like I said, it's the second oldest profession, and it will always
Mm,
be there because life is magical, and people, even those who don't want, trust me, they want to live magic. Like it's very sad the other way around. It's those who are like,
yes.
no, no, I don't want any magic in my life. Okay, but if you can be that way, then yeah, I'm sorry for you.
I think this is a wonderful point to start to wrap this up, because
Yeah.
my original goal with these episodes and these chats with magicians were to keep it to 15 minutes, but I don't want to I
50,
don't want Yeah, so that was the original idea, but I didn't want to limit anyone. So your thoughts on magic for me are really important for people to hear. And as magicians and as people creating magic for other people, for audiences, whether they're paying audiences or whether they're not, I think all of these things are super interesting and things that people should take a lot of time to think about and discuss with their friends and discuss with their magician friends and family. So with that point of adapting and moving with the times, I have one final question to ask you,
Yes.
and that is, if if there was one thing that about magic specifically, if there was one thing that you could change today, and it would be different tomorrow, is there anything that you would change about magic?
What do
Whether
you
that
mean?
be the way we learn magic or something about how magicians interact with each other or how magicians present, let's say for example you hated when people over explain things. So magicians have a tendency to say, "Oh, and here I have a box of cards, and I'm going to take the cards out, and I'm going to shuffle the cards." So
Mhm.
if there was one thing that you could change, maybe that thing that you could change was magicians stopping to over explain themselves. So is there anything within magic, or it might be, um,
You know what?
like you said, it's so important for magicians to work with other magicians. You were saying about how a show is not an individual thing. You need to work with writers and you need to work with stage theater directors. So if there was one thing that you would like to change about magic, what would it be to improve it?
You know what? I think I wouldn't want to change. I don't have to change anything because everybody has to learn from the journey, from their mistakes. For example, if you're doing it in that way, keep doing it, or
Mhm.
not. You'll see that, right? If anything, I would say to that is the day you become a good magician is when the ego goes away. Because I understand that when you start doing magic, you go to places, okay, and you're the cool guy, you're doing the amazing things, and so it's like, oh, me, oh, and everyone's like, oh yeah, did you see that
Yeah.
guy? Yeah, and it's like, oh, and some people stay stuck with that forever, you know.
Mhm.
And I think that once the ego goes away, you become a better magician because you realize it's not about me, it's about them. I know what I do. I do this every day. I cannot even experience magic the same way. That's another point. Becoming a magician, the sad part is that the magic goes away because you
Mhm.
understand how the magic works. But you realize that the real magic lies in the moments you create with others. And that when you do it, everybody presents themselves to you in the best possible version. And that to me is the real magic.
I don't think there's anything we can add to that. I think that is such a perfect way to end this chat and this episode of what is magic. So thank you so much, John, for joining me for this, and I really appreciate you taking the time to honestly and transparently sharing your thoughts on magic. And hopefully, this chat has been inspiring to one or many magicians.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
You too.
Ciao.